Okay, for the benefit of those who may watch this on YouTube later, this is Danielle Morrill, and I'm here with Sid to talk about the idea of website first. We talk a lot about handbook first at GitLab, and there was an MR recently that got my attention talking about places where maybe even before the handbook, we want to update the website itself. And I was just hoping to get a little more color on that from you, Sid, and also just hear a little more about what's on your wish list in terms of what that would mean in practice, since I'm now leading the growth marketing team and can probably help make those things happen.
Yeah, thanks. It's not a sequence or before. It's like content lives somewhere. We should have a single source of truth. If it lives on the website, great, you update it there. Some materials are just not really, like it doesn't make sense on the website. People would be very confused. So those live in our handbook. But preferably we put things on the website. Website first is make sure that you have a great single source of truth and you reuse that. What we've been seeing is that, for example, we made a great slide deck about how we compete with a certain competitor, but that's presented at a sales meeting and then kind of no one is able to find it. We even have a tool for like competitive intelligence, looked at the user stats, no one's looking at it. But at the same time, we have comparison pages that have thousands of visitors, and we're not updating that because every time we put it in a presentation or something else. And the reason is it takes more work to actually put it on the website. It's more tedious, but it's worth it because it will be viewed a lot more. So you have more leverage. So that's the idea. And then when you make the presentation, it should just be screenshots of the website or of the handbook. Mm-hmm. That will look worse, but it saves you, like, you don't have to duplicate effort. You don't have to kind of, there's kind of a single source of truth. There's an evergreen version. People know it's in the handbook and they can more easily find that section because they know it's literally the same text. So it's easy to search for. As you are making the presentation, you improve the handbook. It's open to contributions. It's hard to, you can't even, I don't think, suggest it to a presentation, but anyway, nobody goes back and improves the presentation. The handbook is there and it's easy to contribute to. It's integrated with all the rest of our processes, like a website, a page is something you can link to that can be referenced from multiple places. Yeah, many more people consume it. And it also shows like the people that you present it to, like this is public, it's easily accessible. If you want to go back, you just Google it. And so that's, I think, what we should go to. So kind of any presentation should be screenshots of the website, screenshots of the handbook, and screenshots from SciSense. And if not, like, why are you kind of wasting your time creating a duplicate version? Or even worse, it's nowhere in the handbook. I just created for this presentation and now all that work is going to evaporate because very few people will reference the presentation later on.
How do you think about, when I read this MR, my first thought was, oh my gosh, we need to harvest so much content from the handbook and actually move it to about.gitlab.com. But how do you think about where things live? Does that matter very much, or is search sort of making that irrelevant?
It's not something top of mind for me. As long as there's a single source of truth, I don't really care where it is. As long as it's single source of truth, as long as it's publicly accessible and it's open to contributions.
What do you have on your wish list in terms of when you think website first content? Is there like a bucket or things that come to mind where you're like, why doesn't this exist today?
Oh, well, I think our comparison pages should be a lot better. I know that's not directly your field, but that's top of mind for me. Okay.
We're working on it too, actually.
Cool.
Just had a conversation about it today.
There's a lot of nuance to that. And I think we should capture that nuance on those pages. Every time we have a question from a salesperson, like, oh, what about this? What about that? We capture that there. It should be the most extensive, like it should be ridiculously detailed. Like for our top competitors, we probably have 30 pages of material. Dump it all on there. Like give people incredible detail and fidelity. And also point out all the stuff that's wrong with GitLab. The comparison pages should be the rallying cries. Not sure that's a violent analogy. No, I think you have a rallying cry in a sporting game. So it should be the rallying cry for our product managers. Mm-hmm. God, this has been bothering me that we haven't kept up.
How do you think about different audiences? So like if I visit about.gitlab.com and I'm a new person discovering GitLab for the first time, maybe I'd be overwhelmed by the amount of detail in the handbook. But so sometimes marketing tries to, drive a person towards a specific like activity, like with a call to action button. It's almost like there's an outside facing and an inside facing version of how GitLab thinks about ideas, just for all sorts of concepts. Do you think we could do something or better or different to make it so you can discover the deeper version without overwhelming person?
Yeah. We've tried a lot of times to have two versions. Every single time we ended up with two out-of-date versions of the content every single time. And that's much worse. Like that's much worse. So what we should have is we should have a single source of truth, and can be multiple pages, but for conversation's sake, let's call it a single page. But it should start off like, what are we even talking about? Why does this matter? Give me a super low friction way to consume this content. It's like a YouTube embedded video. Like start off with the softer content, and then as you get down the page, you can dial it up. The page should probably end if it's about a feature with the troubleshooting section, where it's like super hardcore. Run this script, or you might get this cryptic error. So that should be a progression on the page. Not so much as let's make two versions, because that failed every single time. Mm. And then call to action, great. Let's have call to action. Let's have a ton of them on that page.
So one example I'm thinking about where I'm struggling with this is we have our kind of all remote handbook, and kind of that's a big push right now on the front page of gitlab.com. But we also have our internal content about working remote, and it's kind of more handbooky and geared towards employees. I feel like that's almost turning into two different versions of the same thing. How do you think about that? Is that true, or is that a nuance I'm missing?
That's true, and that's a problem. But there's a much more pressing problem, is that even the all remote handbook has two pages to discover it, the guides pages and the other page. Darren will know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Because every time he adds a page, he has to add it in two places. And then one looks kind of good, but it's super confusing because you don't know you can click there. And one looks really miserable, but actually you know that the links are links. And I can screen share if you want to. Like, let's fix that problem first and then worry about the rest. I acknowledge that the rest is also a problem, and it would be good to bring that together. But there's something much bigger problem, much easier to solve before that.
So one reason I feel like we gear towards building marketing landing pages is because the handbook isn't very attractive. But you're mentioning, screenshotting pages and maybe not worrying so much about that. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of the philosophy of like, what's the finish level really need to be anyway?
Yeah, so the website, especially the docs pages, should be much more beautiful. If you go to the docs now, it just looks horrible. Like it has a menu on both sides. That's 10 years ago people did that. The docs should look striped, beautiful. That should be our ambition level.
I bet you wrote some of those docs, Sid. That some of them might be 10 years old.
Yeah, and look, and I was there, and I was the CEO when we introduced dual level navigation, and and I condoned that. So it's not about people making mistakes. It's about where we want to go. And then still a screenshot, even of a beautiful looking website, will still look worse in your presentation. And that's something we'll live with, because we know all the other advantages.
How do you think about iterate when it's not just a question of updating factual information? So with the handbook, obviously, if something's just wrong, it's easy for me to know that I should fix it. But sometimes the things I want to change are more of a taste thing. sometimes I feel like, for me, I start to feel resistance towards iterate, where that breaks down of like, is the change I'm making actually objectively better? Maybe it's harder to say.
Oh, it doesn't. That's not the criteria. It's like, as long as it's not worse.
Okay.
It's really important, right? You don't have to prove it's better.
Yeah.
Like, as long as it's not worse. So just make the change. It's your taste. Someone doesn't like it, they can change it back. We didn't have edit wars so far at GitLab. I think we're all professional enough to hop on a call if we see each other reverting each other's edits a few times, but it hasn't happened in the history of GitLab. So if you just think like, I want it like that, totally cool to change.
I hope everyone watching this who has opinions about how our website could be more beautiful will come and contribute as a result of that.
Yeah, so you're not going to make some of the docs pages beautiful by external contributions. It's a ton of work.
Maybe GitLabers doing it, yeah.
Yeah, no, there has to be a conscious effort, and I actually put an article on number 5 on our agenda, written by Lee Robinson, who talks about how Stripe designs beautiful websites, and a lot of that is attention to detail, the typography, the color scheme, but even like what happens when you hover over a button and things like that. And then you go to, I don't know, remote GitLab. You go to this page, and like this, now they're underlined, but this doesn't even look like links. Like this looks like, I don't know, a banner or something due to the background. So there's a lot that we can do. And then if you go to the docs pages, you have the menu on the left and the menu on the right. Like, we should probably get rid of the menu on the right. There's no indentation here, and it should be like it's indented here, so we should just have it there as well. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Now, I must say, there's pretty colors now on this page, so yay for that. That's an improvement. But what we should probably have is like even more multimedia. There should be a video. There should be like, why do you need this in the first place? Why care about this page? That's how every page should start off.
Speaking of videos, one thing I noticed is we've got GitLab Unfiltered, and we've got all these great videos there, but very rarely do I find videos embedded into pages on a website or the handbook. Is that a conscious thing, or any thoughts on that?
No, we should do a lot more of that. That's the whole idea. The idea was to create this kind of floodgate. No, that's not a word. This river of content that we could pick from and remix from. So embedding video should be like second nature. The Shadows have done a ton of embedding because I always tell them that it should be second nature throughout the company.
Were you always into doing YouTube videos? Actually, always wanted to ask you this. You've seemed super comfortable doing these, but when GitLab started, Zoom probably wasn't, I don't think it existed, and video was harder. Like, what's the genesis there?
Yeah, we had the handbook, and a lot of people reported that like, oh, it's a lot of reading, etc. And then you think like, well, what's an easy medium? Like, watching television is one of the easiest things in life. So I started just recording a ton more stuff. And I think it's a great opportunity. Like, Unfiltered is like super boring, but there's these gems in it. So you could consider someone who just continually looks for good content on Unfiltered and kind of is really good with editing and puts that out on the main channel, on Twitter, on blog posts, everything else. I think we're sitting on top of this gold mine, but like all gold, you have to shift through a lot of sand to find the gold. But in the end, the gold is pretty nice because it has such an authentic feel to it, because it is just recording the meeting and letting the tape roll.
Yeah.
For an episode of Top Gear, or for like a normal sitcom, they have 50 hours of tape for an hour-long final edition. For an episode of Top Gear, they have 1,000 hours. So to create high-quality content, one thing you have to do is just let the tapes roll and just be able to edit out a lot more. And I think we have that with GitLab Unfiltered. We just need to do the editing, which can be a ton of work.
One thing that I'd add is it becomes easier and less daunting if you don't think about the catalog of years behind, but start like right now. So that every time I'm in an unfiltered chat with someone on remote, I'm thinking literally as they're responding. I'm like sifting through in my head all the remote pages that exist. And when they say something, there's this key anecdote. I think this is where it would slot in. So as soon as it goes back up, I just look at the video, scroll to where it was, and embed it, peg to that start time, and maybe a small transcription, and then it's done. So if you do it in real time, like you think real time about the content that's happening in the video as it relates to the handbook, but this requires you to start handbook first. Like you need to have a certain amount of the handbook kind of pre-cached in your head so that when this is happening, you'll figure out what the relevant places are for it. Now, how realistic that is for everyone, I'm not sure. It helps that it's a part of my role. But otherwise, it would be really overwhelming.
So Sid, we've got just a few minutes left, and I think in all good YouTube videos, people are good at leaving a teaser for another video that they've already got. And I happened to watch your peanut butter versus the long tail video yesterday, which I feel could be very relevant to marketing as we think about, what should we improve first? It's very tempting to want to go kind of touch everything and improve everything, and kind of I've just started a new team, so I'm tempted to spread myself a little bit thin and like make a bunch of little MRs. And I'm trying to figure out kind of where we are on the long tail journey. I'm very curious. One, can you maybe apply that lesson to marketing as you see it at GitLab? And then two, can you say a little teaser to get people interested in watching the rest of that video? And I'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah. The video basically says, don't peanut butter, don't spread your effort across everything. And it's okay to have a long tail of stuff that's a low level of shame, but focus the majority of the effort on the things that are working without feeling the need to cut off that tail, because that tail will inform you in the future. So what I'd love for the marketing team is to look really at like page views. Mm-hmm. How many people are watching those pages, and look at like what are the pages, what is the easiest improvement per page view, basically. Like which pages are getting a ton of views and are really easy to make better, because probably they're of low quality right now. So what are the worst pages that are getting a ton of views?
Got it. Sounds like a breadth first search for expected value.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to link to that for those who are watching. I definitely recommend that conversation that Sid and some other members of the GitLab team. And Sid, thank you for this. This was fun and gave me a lot of good ideas to go chase down.
Yeah. Thanks for recording. Appreciate it.